The Reverend Jesse Jackson is dead, and many Africans keep ignoring it. We see the headlines, we maybe tweet rest in peace or even retweet a quote and we move on. But what if I told you that this man helped shape the political language of black power across the entire world, including here in Africa, and most of us don't even realize it? You see, we often view the African-American civil rights struggle as if it were an American TV show. We watch it, but we struggle to see how it affects us. You see, Reverend Jesse Jackson in his lifetime proved that black political power in Chicago or Atlanta could directly alter the geopolitical reality in Pretoria, Harare, or even in Lagos. And so, before we unpack how a man from South Carolina changed the way the world looks at African sovereignty, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Chika, and it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe to this channel. 96.2% of the people who watched my videos in the last 28 days are not subscribed, and that breaks my heart. Please don't be one of them. Subscribe, it would mean a lot to me. Now, let's get into the video. I'd like us to begin from the pivot from protest to power. If you only know him from a few history books, you're missing the point. Yes, Reverend Jesse Jackson was a protege of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was there on the balcony in Memphis in 1968 when Dr. King was assassinated. But what Jackson did next is the first lesson in power. When the movement was fracturing and grieving, Jackson realized that protests and boycotts were no longer enough. Marching gets you sympathy. Politics gets you policy. He founded Operation Push and later the Rainbow Coalition. He transitioned Black America from demanding civil rights to demanding economic and political leverage. But here's what Africans completely miss about his evolution. He wasn't just fighting for domestic equality. He was fighting for black political legitimacy on a global scale. Jackson recognized early on that the black diaspora in America was a sleeping giant. If mobilized, it wouldn't just change American laws, it could change American foreign policy. He was proving that we deserve a seat at the geopolitical table, not just our spots on the protest line. And I'll talk about why many thought his protests were even controversial. But first, let's talk about his direct connection to the African continent. You see, Jackson did not just talk about Pan-Africanism. He weaponized American politics for African liberation. In the 1980s, the official policy of the United States government under President Ronald Reagan towards Apartheid South Africa was called constructive engagements. It was a polite way of saying that the United States was going to keep doing business with the apartheid regime while quietly asking them to be less racist. Can you imagine that? While Western leaders like Reagan and Prime Minister of the UK, Margaret Thatcher, were still labeling Nelson Mandela and the ANC as terrorists, Jackson went to war with this policy. He used his platform to push relentlessly for crippling economic sanctions against South Africa and the apartheid regime. He made it a central issue of his presidential campaigns. He was telling the American establishment, if you want the black votes in Detroit, in Philadelphia, in Atlanta, you have to stop funding the operation of black people in Johannesburg. Think about the sheer geopolitical weight of that. So Madiba didn't just become a global icon by accident. He became an icon partly because figures like Jackson kept international pressure alive in the halls of Washington. He forced the American media to cover apartheid. Jackson helped mainstream a very dangerous, very powerful idea. Whatever happens to black people anywhere is a political issue everywhere. That, if you ask me, is the purest definition of Pan-Africanism. Before I talk about the controversy though, here's a common mistake most Africans make about African-American struggles, and it's important that we address it here. Because most Africans tend to think that the American civil rights movement is a strictly domestic issue. It is not. It never was. It was, in fact, the blueprint for global leverage. Because when Reverend Jackson ran for US presidency in 1984 and in 1988, he changed one major thing. He proved that black political coalitions could influence global policy. Back then in 1988, he didn't just run a token campaign. He won 11 contests. He secured 7 million votes. He became a legitimate threat to the establishment. And because he held that much voting power, he forced the Democratic Party to adopt his foreign policy stances. He forced them to officially declare South Africa a terrorist state in their party platform. His campaigns forced the United States establishment to do three things: take Africa more seriously, take economic sanctions more seriously, and take black foreign policy interests seriously. He unilaterally changed their diplomatic posture. Even African leaders who never formally met him benefited from that massive shift in Western foreign policy. Now, let's talk about how he was a complicated, controversial man. I'm not here to paint him as a flawless saint. In fact, his critics would tell you he was too political, too ambitious. To the Washington establishment, he was a radical agitator. To some grassroots activists, he was too eager to negotiate with the system. He stepped on toes. He elbowed his way to the front of the cameras. But look, listen to me. I would argue that is exactly what power politics looks like. If you enter the arena to actually change the game, you will be criticized. You don't change global policy by being polite. You don't dismantle a system like apartheid or negotiate hostage releases by waiting for an invitation. So yes, he was ruthless in his ambition because the system he was fighting were ruthless in their oppression. So what is the actual takeaway for us today in 2026? I would say that there are three hard lessons African leaders and citizens, all of us, must learn from his life. Number one, diaspora power matters. Look at how other nations use their diaspora to influence Western policy. African Americans influence global narratives more than many sovereign African states do. When we as Africans mock the diaspora, we are leaving massive geopolitical leverage on the table. We need to respect and align with that leverage. One way we can do that is making African American civil rights issue there an issue here. Number two, political ambition is not evil. Jesse Jackson ran for president of the free world twice in the 1980s when people told him it was impossible. I'm talking years before President Barack Obama and his presidency became a reality. Imagine that level of boldness. We need African leaders with that kind of audacity. Leaders who want to be global players, not just local chiefs fighting over a national treasury. And three, global black solidarity is strategic, not emotional. A divided Africa is easily exploited. A united Africa, aligned with its global diaspora, that is an economic and political superpower. And so, in conclusion, here's what I'd say. The late Reverend Jesse Jackson wasn't just an American civil rights leader. He was living proof that black political ambition can reshape global power. The real question is, when will Africa produce leaders who think that globally?